Questo è il rinascimento per l'ambiente. Con l'arte del riciclo, l'imballaggio diventa capolavoro. Questo è il rinascimento per l'ambiente. Con l'arte del riciclo, l'imballaggio diventa capolavoro.
Civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Buonasera a tutti, grazie.
Good evening, thank you for being here. Minister Orlando will join us through Zoom because for institutional reasons he cannot be with us today. But I would like to thank Monica Poggio, CEO of Bayer Italy. And then we have the President of Philip Morris Italy, Marco Hafner, Luigi Sbarra, Secretary General of CISL, and Andrea Orlando, who will be connected through Zoom. Thank you very much for being here with us. So the title of our meeting is A Passion for Work, that mirrors in a way the title of our meeting this year. For a very simple reason. For us, work is a human being moving in the present situation and creating relationship with other people, trying to face things, to change things, to increase resources by joining forces with other people. So the I becomes a we. In an attempt to improve his or her own conditions. That is why the title is a very general one, without going zooming on the individual proposals, especially now that we are in the middle of an electoral campaign. But what we are interested in is all the proposals that support the country. We don't like neoliberalism that tend to leave people alone, facing difficulties. But as the person working is what we're interested in, it's very important that we don't simply support people, because that's not enough to help them solve problems, and doesn't help them feel safe in their attempt to improve their life conditions. And it doesn't help them support their family and improve their conditions and their future generations' life conditions. So we need to use all the tools we have at our disposal to help people go back to work. And this is our framework when we say that we have a passion for work. So many people complain, saying we are looking for workers, but we can't find them. Well, first of all, we have demographic problems because we have generations that are retiring now, and the size of the retiring generation is far bigger than the size of the generation of people that enter the labor market. And then we have people with a different training compared to the role and the kind of workers that the industry is looking for. That is another part of the problem. So we will need to work for an increase in the employment rates. That is why it's very important to develop a set of rules to support training in the first part of our life, but also later on. And many of the initiatives that have been carried out were in this direction. We fought in order to guarantee everyone's some kind of education, and now we're fighting so that people can get training and constant training. This is a very important part of it. So we need a set of rules. A set of rules that need to be negotiated. We're talking about minimum salary, and it's very important to recognize high quality work, because if work is no longer a source of hope for people, then it will be more difficult for us to take part in a changing world. And the nature of what is work will change. So we're talking about a set of rules that aim to protect the quality of work, give new life to work. And if we have a clear idea of this, we're talking about a set of rules that have to be agreed upon to support work and for work to be at the center of our activities. We're talking about professional training, continuous training, the protection of workers by trade unions and other associations, and how to work to reduce taxation on work, and also in an attempt to give dignity to people, to avoid the situation in which people work but are not paid enough. So we will need to find an agreement on this topic. Now the floor to Minister Orlando, who's with us today. on the topic of work and the central role of work. This is not just a law. We need also to find agreement around this topic. Thank you. I would like to say that I totally agree with your perspective in the sense that today we often talk about the labor market, a labor market in which the demographic development has an impact, a significant impact, and that requires a change of paradigm. So work is no longer just something to be invested on. It's also a limited resource. So we need to work in order to protect it, because there is a reduction in the number of people available for work. But there's also the problem that the integrated labor market causes migration flows from Italy to other countries, especially among younger workers, is becoming a significant phenomenon. And so it's becoming increasingly difficult to find the right people for certain roles. So we cannot say that we need a law or more laws, because that's not enough. It's a social issue, so we need to find some kind of agreement. So, first of all, the National Recovery and Resilience Plan already set some tools, 4.5 million euros for active policies. This is an unprecedented action. The other pillar is the Fund for New Skills. And this is the result of negotiation with the social partners. We are waiting out for the State Region Conference for the 2.0 version of the New Skill Fund. And then we need to do more in the sense that fair payment and the guarantee of fair payment for all workers is a necessity, especially in those areas where manpower is lacking. So I think we need to make an effort so that we have, on the one hand, tools that allow us to reach a minimum thresholds in terms of income by law or by labor agreement. I also think that we should consider how this parameter can be obtained through negotiation. So we know our country has a long tradition from this point of view. The so-called poor labor happens in, for example, very small companies where contractive bargaining is not common, or in the tourism sector, where trade unions are not so strong. So I don't think it should be a kind of opposition. I think we should find a way to join these two elements together. And we were about to make the first step, but then the government had to withdraw in a way. So we know that there are sectors where bargaining is stronger. And so they could be taken as a reference. We should also consider that some sectors are weaker. In some sectors, the labor agreements define wages and working hours that are not fair. And there's also the issue of competition. We know that trade unions have spoken about this. So we need to work together on this in a very practical way to define rules so that there is a reference point when negotiating. We had a lot of disagreements around three main questions. So minimum wage on the one hand, the reduction of taxation on labor, on work, and then labor agreements renewal. The renewal of labor agreements must be fostered also by a reduction of taxation on work. But that, of course, has no influence on the lack of, development of wages, the evolution of wages. So we should join together, on the one hand, the rules for the renewal of labor agreements, taxation on work. All these elements should be tackled together so that any negotiation takes place within a framework of clear rules. In this case, I think it's important to find an agreement. This is a very urgent matter because we cannot really be competitive if we don't solve these problems. Wages, first of all. As you were saying, a wage is a way for society to recognize the value that is attributed to work. Maybe it's not the only instrument, but it's one of the instruments. And then we were also considering the way work is used. If we want to invest on training, if we think work is so important, can we really maintain so many different labor agreements? Shouldn't we select the most effective ones? For example, apprenticeship programs should be promoted also with tax incentives, for example. So we should try and reach an agreement so that we can take care of work. This is essential in an aging country like ours, where young people are starting to leave. And without a significant investment on workers, society is in a way at risk. And we run the risk of missing opportunities related to the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. Thank you for your speech, and also thank you for this idea of taking care of workers. Now, going back to what you were saying at the end of your speech, I would like to ask Monica Poggio, as Managing Director of Bayer Italy, to ask her opinion on a topic, and that is trying to use positive experiences as a reference point. Cases in which the entrance of young people into the labor market is facilitated. For example, internship programs. They could be something that we could analyze, maybe improve so that it's more interesting for the company itself. Our apprenticeship program refer to the alliance between the labor market and the school market. In other countries, there is a dual system according to which there are the creation of skills on the one hand and education on the other. I know that you could spend hours on this, so I'll give the floor to you. Good afternoon. Of course, I will not be too long. I will try to share with you my experience and my passion for this issue, that is young people. Now, helping young people move in this world, which is so complex in terms of organization, companies, skills, choices to be made along the education process. We often talk about skills, and there could be much to say about skills and knowledge. But the point is that we need to provide new generations with skills so that they will be able to choose a path that will finally lead them to the labor market. You mentioned the European experiences. I'm very familiar with the German system. But the point is that we should shape our education system so that it's more modern, more up-to-date, considering the market needs. This morning, Giorgio Vitalini shared some data that are a bit worrying. Our employment rate in general has increased, but the unemployment rate among young people is higher. We have 2 million NEET people, so young people who are not looking for a job and are not receiving any kind of education. The dropout rate in the different levels, education levels, is very high. For example, dropout rates after the first year of university, still very high. So what happens in other countries where these figures are lower than they are in Italy? Well, in those countries, their systems are more well-rooted, and they consider the possibility of alternating between work and education. This means that young people after their high school diploma have access to a wider range of education opportunities. So once they get their high school diploma, they can continue their education at university, or they can attend other kind of education, technical, for example, courses that will be more rapid and easier to use in the labor market. With internship, for example, in companies, so within the same week you can spend time at school and you can spend time at the company. So people carrying out this kind of education courses have skills that can be immediately used by the companies. In Italy, we are trying to do this. I am an ambassador when it comes to education, especially the education of technical high schools that are now called technological high schools that are 2-year courses for people with technical skills. And more than 30% of the training is spent within the company. Teachers and professors come from the professional world, and there is a co-design that is a joint venture between schools and companies. So the education, the curriculum is not so static or fixed. You can modify things so that you can adapt it to the requirements of the companies. Because nowadays things are speeding up very much. So things are still a bit slow here in Italy in terms of adopting this kind of model. But the figures in the other countries tell us that this is effective. And someone this morning said that in technological high schools we have 18,000 students enrolled. Abroad we are talking about hundreds of thousands. Here there are 18,000, and the data show that more than 80% of these students, 1 year after their diploma, they find a job, and a job that is consistent with what they studied. And these figures, I think, speak for themselves. They're very positive. So now we can say in a very clear way that it works. So this kind of education path works, and the National Recovery and Resilience Plan has invested 1.5 billion because these courses are still limited, so we need to strengthen them, increase them. But this requires cooperation with the nearby companies. You need three factors. You need companies looking for certain skills. You need a training center able to train in that area. And then you need students who are interested. Just think that if this course is not very well known, it's not so easy to find students. You need to invest time and resources. But it's a way to solve this mismatch problem that we heard about this morning. 1/3 of the young people don't find a job, but also companies don't find the people with the skills that they are looking for. So we need to go on in this direction. For years, we have neglected technical training. This doesn't mean that you have to neglect soft skills. We need to train people as people thinking subjects. But it's very important that right before entering the labor market, they acquire technical skills that will help them enter the labor market in a more effective way. Thank you. This idea of joining together the thought process and the technical knowledge, this will allow people to develop their skills and participate actively and consciously to the labor process. Now I'd like to ask Secretary General of CISL, Luigi Sbarra. The Minister mentioned the essential contents of a pact, an agreement that we need to reach. At least those who are willing to put work and labor at the center of our activity. What is your opinion, considering that you've been talking about an agreement, a pact, for months now?
L'invito, grazie al meeting. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here at the meeting and for, involving me in these important days where also work and its value have been given a space. Work also means personal, professional fulfillment and allows to create some connection between the person and the community. The Pact for Work has been for a long time among the priorities of our social agenda. And we underlined the need to accelerate the exchange with institutions on this topic, which is really decisive for today and for tomorrow. I'm sure that we need to abandon the idea that we can create employment only by writing something on a piece of paper, even laws. We need to create employment for generations of people. And in order to do this, this has to be the main axis in, let's say, in a process that includes and involves all the institutions. In the past, people thought that with the dignità or dignity, we would have been able to overcome the job instability of the past, whereas that decree only accelerated and increased the number of short-term contracts. And a lot of people also thought that with the introduction of the basic income in Italy, the reddito di cittadinanza, with the minimum income guaranteed by the state, we would have been able to go beyond a lot of problems, especially in poverty. But that kind of initiative was not the best to help the employment and the labor market. So we should relaunch public investments and private investments and create employment before distributing jobs. And you can do that only if you invest privately and publicly to ensure that the job opportunities are high-quality opportunities and that are well paid. Another point is that the policies for the labor market have focused on passive politics for years. And there have been no investments on strong investments to make knowledge and skills and training grow. In Germany, they used to call it dual system, and that system worked well because for years they focused on training and internships in particular being the main way for young people to get into the work of labor. So they invested in human capital, in active policies, and so creating services for employment, coordinating services at a national and regional level. We have a law that is on the reform of Article 5 of the Labor Code. And again, I want to underline that we need to invest in employment centers. A lot of people say that we should draw inspiration from what Germany did, and we should do it. There is the dual system, and over 110,000 members of staff, operators that help the population, but trying to lay the conditions, lay the basis for the government to work on that. Whereas in Italy, we have less than 10,000 members of staff working on that, and most of them have unstable job contracts, short-term contracts. So we need to invest a lot on public employment centers. This should be in relation with private job agencies that have been gathering a lot of experience in these years. And we should be able to make connections between the employment centers with schools, with universities, with professional training, the accredited professional training. And let me specify some bilateral agreements is what we need. As the minister was saying, the National Recovery and Resilience Plan is one of the greatest opportunities to invest in the program for employment, in the dual system, and in the fund for developing new skills. This is the main topic, ensuring training all along one's working life. And it is not by chance if we have contracted, negotiated a right of the person to receive lifelong training. And we need to lay the conditions, lay the basis for these opportunities to multiply, to be more and more, in order to develop competencies and skills. Because, you know, there is this contradiction, which is high employment rates among the youngest population, especially in some areas of the country. And on the other hand, there are companies looking for professionals and not being able to find them. This is what I mean when I say investing in the person, in human capitals, in workers. And it's important to change focal point. And the main challenge today is, again, investing in training and re-qualifying workers, people, for this transition which is a green transition, a digital transition, and a democratic transition, as you mentioned at the very beginning. So we need to rethink the word of work, of employment, and this is why it is important to negotiate a pact for employment, for labor. We tried to do it, but we weren't able to achieve results with the current government. But again, this should become the main focus of the next government, to get to a real social pact for development and for growth, focusing again on the development of skills and the training opportunities. This is what we should do, protecting the world of labor, of employment, give dignity to the people without exploitations of young people, of women. Work should not be that. Work should not mean that people risk their lives. Too many too many accidents, too many injuries at work, too much irregular work. And thinking that a minimum wage or a minimum salary might solve all these problems, in my opinion, is nonsense. What we need in Italy is a quality leap. We need to raise wages, salaries, remunerations, and the value of pensions. Because if we rank last among the OECD countries in terms of salaries, well, this is also due to the fact that the country is not growing and hasn't been growing for over 25 years. There is no productivity, and you cannot reallocate productivity and wealth. And if you cannot have this redistribution, there are more inequalities and a wider gap between the poor and the rich. And so we need to relaunch investments, reduce employment, taxes, and recover some money to increase people's pays, people's salaries. And then a new era of trade unions to reorganize work in companies after the COVID-19 pandemic. Think of working hours, of the family and working life balance, and there's so many things that require us to rethink our model that should focus more and more on the principles of responsibility, on a participatory model. And I think that this electoral campaign is focusing on everything but work, but employment, but the change that we need in employment, and everything but participation, which is required in this country. This is what we need for a new era of democracy and responsibilization of people. Because it is now time to start a debate on real participation and real participatory life. Because, you know, when companies are doing well, profits are only shared among few people. Whereas when companies don't do well because wrong choices have been made, it's the normal people and workers who pay for that, because they are fired, because they do not receive what they need, and they receive only unemployment benefits. We need some new social responsibility, corporate social responsibility that is real, to ensure the future of Italian working women and men.
Grazie segretario della CISL. Ministro, io so che
Thank you very much. I know that Minister Orlando has to go. I don't know if I received the right information. I'm sorry, but you're on mute. Sorry. Yes, let me just say a few things that I share of what Mr. Sbarra was saying. We need to consider Germany. We need to look at Germany for several reasons, for technical training and for the dual system or for the development of skills. But all these things are within a framework that we should consider and that maybe go beyond the employment policies. Companies there can manage better those processes because they are organized better in a way than ours. And the second point is about skills and about the transitions, the various transitions and the participation of workers in decision-making process, as well as the role of trade unions in big companies. I think that this topic is crucial, is core, because if we don't have this kind of approach, a lot of mechanisms cannot work. And I really think that we need to reflect on economic democracy. And this is something that gets more and more important if workers are asked to make changes and especially to, get involved in these transitions. And for these transitions to be successful, we need to have these changes because otherwise they risk to fail and create more inequalities. Well, being a minister, and as a minister, I can confirm what Mr. Sbarra was saying earlier on about the fact that this topic is not amongst the, let's say, most debated topics and should deserve more attention, because there are major problems in the world of employment, in particular the job instability. As for active policies, a major effort has been made, but Article 5 that Mr. Sbarra mentioned is still crucial. And employment centers, when I started working as a minister, were in a far worse situation than now. However, there are still difficulties, especially for the regions that would need more active policies. Looking at what we've done, I think that we've done whatever we could to take up the challenges in front of us. There was a new law on ETS, and there were resources for the dual system, for active policies. Employment centers have been improved together with the National Inspectorate, Work Inspectorate. It is clear that there are still problems like irregular work and stability, but now we would need something more and some, crucial points that are also included in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. I really hope that we can take these steps forward. Otherwise, what we've done so far might become useless, meaningless. And this is fundamental both in terms of competitiveness and for reducing or rather eliminating inequalities. Thank you. Thank you for taking part and good luck for the electoral campaign that is about to start. Well, that has actually started. Thanks to you. Thank you once again. And now let's move to Marco Hannappel, President and CEO of Philip Morris Italy. I would like to ask him his point of view of an experience that is an important foreign investment in Italy in very advanced technologies, in innovative products, and something that hasn't stopped, an investment that hasn't stopped, that has been going on, both in terms of technologies and in terms of skills, competencies that are not only interesting for you, but also for the whole supply chain. So the floor is yours. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me at the meeting. I think that what Sbarra has said is crucial. Talking about these points for the future of employment is crucial. We have experienced a unique transformation process. And, well, you know, when something changes in a sector, well, the change doesn't happen from the inside, but generally from the outside. Because in 2016, the major player in the world of cigarettes and tobacco wrote a document, and the board said that they wanted to abandon the traditional world and get to a new market. And they chose Italy. And, you know, when someone wants to create a product that doesn't exist, we are the best at that. And I must admit that in Italy we are really strong. Our plant is in this region, in Emilia-Romagna, and it is the biggest plant in Europe, and it's the biggest in Italy of the last 20 years. It is in Crespellano. It produces the hits used for the IQOS systems. This plant is about to turn 6. So 6 years ago, there was nothing there. Today, the factory exports more than the olive oil sector, than the automotive sector in Italy. And everything was created with machinery built in Italy, with ideas that came from Italy. And that's how we kept on investing in Italy. We invested in renewing our relationships and our agreements with Coldiretti, so with the agricultural world. There are over 1,000 farms working for us. And we have a long-term project, 100 million a year of investment. And this agreement allowed to improve production process in agriculture, considering the draft of the summer. We have been able to save 40% of water thanks to that. And so this is very important. So an agreement with agriculture, and then digital services. 100 million were invested in Taranto. In November 2020, we opened a plant there where over 350 people are employed. And then the research and development. The research and development, both in terms of products and in terms of people, because the more developed our machinery, the more you need to invest in R&D. And so we invested 600 million euros creating the Excellence Center of Philip Morris. It's the biggest in the world. It's like a factory producing factories. We not only do we produce the finished product and export it all over the world, but then when a factory needs to be built, a new factory needs to be built, part of the process is carried out in Italy. 250 people were involved last year. And there is a great development process which is ongoing. There are engineers, professionals involved and being involved in the near future. And then multinationals generally have academies within. So big corporations generally offer training when someone gets into the company. And after 20 years, they offer the possibility to senior representatives for them to receive further training. It is clear that one cannot develop competencies on its own, and so we decided to collaborate with different universities, polytechnical universities. We decided to invest in refreshment courses for the ITS trainers and teachers. For example, in Crespellano, we need people working as trainers. And there is always a training that is offered before entering the company. And together with the Emilia-Romagna region, and thanks to this collaboration, we did this by collaborating with startups, with those who have important ideas of the 4.0 industry. And this research and development is carried out thanks to these important partnerships with universities, small and medium enterprises that are part of a big supply chain. That is 38,000 people for Philip Morris involved in our supply chain that was created starting from a product and a factory that only 6 years ago was only filled, and it is 150 kilometers far from here. Thank you.
Adesso Presidente di Conai, che è il Consorzio Nazionale per gli Imballaggi, cioè quel primo pezzettino di economia circolare che, sviluppando le raccolte differenziate, ha introdotto anche nel nostro Paese il recupero di materie, il riciclaggio e così via, chiederei che da protagonista come Presidente di Conai di uno dei tasselli della trasformazione, proprio quello del passaggio all'economia circolare, della sostenibilità ambientale nei cicli produttivi e nei sistemi sociali, quali aspetti vede nell'impatto fra il lavoro, la formazione e le esigenze che verranno a crearsi per quei green works che dovrebbero essere anche buona parte dell'occupazione futura?
Ma parto da un'altra esperienza, visto che oggi si è parlato di ETS e a proposito di eccellenze italiane, perché poi anche noi abbiamo una serie di esercizi italiani su un ETS, provo a raccontarvi l'esercizio che è stato fatto negli ultimi 3 anni a Parma, in questo caso qua, parliamo della culla dell'alimentare, su un esercizio che si chiama Food Farm 4.0. C'è un insegnante, anzi una preside, che a un certo punto ha ereditato un vecchio capannone, che ha deciso di provare a ristrutturarlo per mettere dentro delle linee sperimentali per fare conserve marmellate, un po' di biscotti e del formaggio. Ha vinto un bando del Ministero che ovviamente non era sufficiente per fare la ristrutturazione, per cui ha chiesto al territorio di riuscire a finanziare una parte di questo, quindi metà è venuto dal Ministero, ma l'altra metà è venuto fuori dal mondo imprenditoriale locale, tra banche, aziende alimentari ovviamente. Accanto a questo è nata una sperimentazione interessante perché la scuola è brava a fare alternanza col lavoro o con gli ITS per dare specializzazione, ma poi però bisognava da una parte che questo piccolo laboratorio, in qualche maniera con le linee sperimentali, potessero in qualche maniera farli funzionare. Quindi bisogna acquistare le materie prime, pagare le energie, oggi care, e poi a questo punto vendere i prodotti. Per far questo è nata un'organizzazione privata, assolutamente volontaria, da cui ha iniziato a far parte alcune aziende, mulini, aziende alimentari, chi faceva pomodoro, chi faceva pasta, ma anche in un secondo momento la grande distribuzione, qualche grande marchio tipo S Lunga, o anche le società invece che si occupano di trovare l'incrocio del mismatching del lavoro, cioè chi mette da servizi. Ecco, devo dire che siamo partiti con questo tipo di esercizio, quindi scuola con i ragazzi gestiti dagli insegnanti, una società cooperativa fatta da questi soggetti che invece doveva gestire acquisto materie prime, definire il prodotto e andarlo a vendere sul territorio. Siamo partiti in pieno lockdown, quando si è fermato tutto. Devo dire che però l'esercizio è stato tale per il quale oggi è il secondo anno che andiamo in pari, cioè con quel che vendiamo riusciamo a pagare tutto il funzionamento della scuola, i ragazzi fanno formazione, vengono utilizzate le strutture anche per fare altri prodotti e il tutto a un costo zero, perché da quel che si vende, anzi, si riesce a mettere da parte dei soldi, tant'è che c'è un altro rudere che in qualche maniera stiamo già pensando di andare a fare un investimento per allargare l'attività. Aggiungo un terzo esercizio, ho portato chi si occupava di mettere insieme aziende e start-up, che quando ho visto l'attività che stavano svolgendo dice: guarda, in Italia non c'è nessuna struttura che ha una dimensione di linee produttive così piccole che servono alle start-up per uscire dalla cucina, come si suol dire. Per cui dice: guarda, bisogna che si trovi il modo di riuscire a...
So it's very important that we use this structure to help startup in the food sector. This was not an easy task to perform because you have to work with the school in the right way, because schools have a different kind of approach. And then you have to work with the surrounding community. The school is not enough. You need to create a project considering the surrounding area. So we involved companies who help those who look for work get in contact with those who look for workers. And in this way, we created a project that's specific to that area. So this is just the first exercise that we did. And as this is a case that's important, I wanted to share with you this exercise that was one of the most interesting for us, because we created training programs to provide students with the right skills that companies need. And this was done during a lockdown period. So we were not so sure that we would succeed, but for 2 years in a row, we've been able to pay for all our costs. And we have some money set aside for future investments. Thank you. Now I would like to invite you to have a look at those figures. We still have 15 minutes. So looking at those figures, considering that you come from the entrepreneurial environment and very aware of the problems that labor entails, during the lockdown period, remote work became smart, let's say, and so this led to an acceleration of the digitalization process. In the first speech, Mr. Sbarra said that we can open a new economic democracy period with new forms of participation for workers in the company. If I give you 3 minutes each, can you tell me what kind of changes in the organization of work will take place without isolating workers? Can this be the starting point for real cooperation between the workers inside companies, so that we will have a new season with an agreement for work? Well, this second round of talks is very interesting. I agree with the idea that we need a new model of analysis and understanding of the changes within the organization following the pandemic, for example, the acceleration on all the digital things, because we hear that the pandemic led to an acceleration of the changes. But we still analyze the real situation around us with old lenses, let's say. If we are not aware of the kind of change that our organization is going through in terms of relationship, in terms of value, in terms of activity and processes, we won't be able to understand how to build from this starting point. Remote work changed things. As buyers, we are monitoring. We've been monitoring for 2 years, but we haven't been able to close it yet because of the pandemic. But we are thinking about designing the so-called next normal. So after more than 2 years of emergency, let's say, when an emergency lasts so long, it becomes structural in a way. So what does that mean in terms of impact? How can we manage meetings in a hybrid way with people physically present and people connected online? And how can we negotiate? For example, how can trade unions negotiate? And Sbarra was making reference to the co-management model, German model. And for Philip Morris, the trade relationship model is already a participatory model. So we meet our trade union representative on a constant basis. We have observers according to our labor agreements, our second-level negotiations, and things should, of course, continue this way. But as Mr. Vittadini said this morning, well, he mentioned intermediate subjects. And it's very important that we understand how we can continue our relationships, because it's not just that some of us are here, some of us are connected online, but the model of work is changing. So the lens that we use to watch reality are changes. Otherwise, we won't understand each other, because now we have different values, for example. Things are changing, also socially. So participation, of course, is essential given our German basis. But we need to understand how we can obtain this kind of participation. Internship and co-management according to the German model. And I just wanted to say that we always talk about German models, but also Germany looks at us as well. So when it comes to digital innovation inside the plant, the first pilot project was done in Italy, also for Bayer. So we are open to innovation, but especially in our sector, also thanks to our relationship with trade unions, helped us maintain enthusiasm for change. We are the first partner for Germany. Sorry, Germany for us is the first trade partner. We are the sixth for Germany. Our value chains are very well connected. So, of course, we look at Germany as a reference point in terms of ITS and participation. But we shouldn't simply limit ourselves to a copy and paste approach. Our system has a specific kind of corporate governance. In Germany, things are different. And so this is something that we should bear in mind. Now, going back to your question, ecological transition, sustainability, climate change, in all its violence, of course. I mean, the situation is full of uncertainties also because of the war. So the transition towards a circular economy is fundamental. I've been working on these issues for many years, and I'm one of those who designed the Conai system in Italy. And I'm the president right now. So it's very interesting to look back and analyze the path that we've gone along. In the past, it was a technical issue. Nowadays, it's more an organizational issue. So once again, we go back to the skills required for doing all of this. As Conai, we are Italy ranks among the first countries worldwide for packaging sent to recycling, around 70%, so a significant amount. And we learned from Germany, for example, and we learned how to obtain certain results here in Italy. The National Recovery Plan has helped us because when it's necessary to submit projects to receive funds, you need to have the right people to draft those projects. And if you have limited time, then we helped municipalities, for example, to submit projects for 100 million. We submitted simplified projects. And this led to a new mechanism for municipalities. When it was possible to submit projects, first of all, we started talking about skills, the skills required for a project. Because in order to prepare a project, to draft a project, you need to have the right people with the right skills, and the same once you have to implement the project. Here, we are flexible enough to do this. This is an important skill, an important resource that we need to make use of. As we said, this is teamwork. You need to work with the universities, with the surrounding community, the local communities. And then we actually organized courses, especially in the center and south of Italy, because that area was lagging behind in terms of recycling. About 500 students had post-degree courses in an interdisciplinary way, because we need to have more open skills, because we need to be able to speak the same language, a common language. So, as I said, together with the university, we organized several courses in the last 2 or 3 years for 500 students in 6 universities, and we are increasing these activities. Thank you. Now, Mr. Hannappel, now your opinion. While the participatory model is already present in the pharmaceutical world, and I think this is a very important point. completed the national agreement, the national collective agreement. And I think this is the right way to proceed. As we are about to conclude, I think it's important to mention some issues. For example, a huge one is young people entering the companies. We hired 150 people full-time and long-term. Many of them are young people. But just imagine a new building full of innovation, 4.0 industry. You need to create a kind of intermediary step between a connection between these young people and this new factory. We have to bear in mind that if you work in a company and you have a good relationship with your colleagues and with the machines that you're using, this is very important. A second point is the world of diversity and inclusion, especially for female workers. Philip Morris Italy is the first company to be certified by for the number of women that we have. We have more women than Ferrari has, for example. So the salary gap is there, and we have to bear this in mind. So it's an important change that we have to bring about. So we need to bridge the gap. We need to provide corporate welfare tools to integrate the state ones, the public ones. We are very active from this point of view, so that within our company, it is easier to hire female workers. So the more the possibility of integration between machinery and people and processes, the more this efficiency will lead to other investments. Active policies, I agree with Mr. Sbarra, have to be far more active and far more in line with the needs of those who want to develop in Italy with long-term employment agreements. So we will need to work together on this. Thank you. So thank you for your comment. Now the floor for one last comment before concluding to Luigi Sbarra. Well, I think this is the right time for a change. We need to forget about the speculations of globalization that along the years caused an increase in the gap and a lot of inequalities and poverty. So the dignity, the central role of workers has to be a priority, as well as the responsibility of the person. This means strengthening a set of industrial relations and trade union relations based on responsibility, pragmatism, and reformism, with participation as a prerequisite. Very often we look at what happens elsewhere in other countries. One example is Germany when it comes to co-management, participation, the dual system, the internship projects. And another important thing that they did and that we are unable to do, once the Berlin Wall collapsed, they started a huge operation of social, economic, and geographical cohesion. So in a few years, Germany became a big economic power in Europe. Whereas we have spent 160 years talking about the problems of the south of Italy. And our country is becoming more and more divided. So we need to invest on responsibility, also in our relationship with the future government. I'm concerned about these trends, political trends that want to use laws to solve all the problem, the law on the minimum of working hours, the law on remote work, the law on representation. All these issues have to be the subject of contractual independence between social parts. Because, for example, Germany looks at our contractual system that we built in more than 70 years. All economic activities in our country have a reference to labor agreement. Ms. Poggio was referring to the relations and trade union agreements. During the crisis, we renewed one of the best contracts of the private system. So we have to protect these set of trade union relations. Minimum wage by decree is not the solution. We need to strengthen wages through negotiation, bargaining, nationally and locally. Some people tell me, well, in Germany, the minimum wage is 12 euros. Yes, but in Germany, you have a different kind of situation. They don't have national collective agreements, except with few exceptions. They have lender-based contracts, whereas we have a set of labor agreements that we need to strengthen, that we need to increase. Europe, in the directive on work with dignity, considers us as a reference country. So why should we leave this tradition and follow other practices and examples? So wages, working hours, remote work, working life and private life balance. These are all issues that social partners, trade unions, should negotiate. So please help us implement Article 46 of the Constitution when it comes to participation, so that social partners, through negotiation, will increase the responsibility of workers as regards the company they work in. This is the way to pave the way for change. I sometimes hear people who still talk about Article 18. But for me, now, in this situation, where work is changing, Article 18 means investing in training, and again training, and again training. This is what strengthens the people, the workers. That is why I think trade unions should play an important role. This could help us also be stronger in our relationship with the future government and create the conditions for a new and modern social pact, so that the country will emerge from the aftermath of the pandemic without the negative consequences of the pandemic itself and the war in Ukraine. So we need a new and a modern social pact with investments in industrial policies, energy policies, infrastructural policies, in all the process that aim at updating the public administration sector. I'm really happy to see so many politicians that say that it is necessary to adopt a new energy policy, when for a long time they were against it. They were against incinerator plants, regasification plants, renewable energies. So now they wake up and understand that the energy policy plays a pivotal role for the growth and development of a community. So trade unions' responsibility can play a key role for the creation of a new social model where the quality and value of work are a priority, as well as its participation. It's a new phase of economic democracy. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all of the guests. I thank all the audience. I would like to remind you that work sociologists used to say that you cannot force others love work as we love it. But I felt this evening such a passion, such participation, that I think it's a very important part of our work. And I'm sure this will enrich our work towards the protection of the dignity of workers, as we do to support workers and support work in dignity. Thank you.
Se ci mettiamo un attimo vicini ci fanno anche una fotografia. Questo è un set.
Se
Io l'ho acceso, no, vedi, però lo accendi lo stesso. Non lo so. Sì, probabilmente ho. Adesso non devo accendere più.
aspetta.
Civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Questo è il rinascimento per l'ambiente. Con l'arte del riciclo, l'imballaggio diventa capolavoro. Questo è il rinascimento per l'ambiente. Con l'arte del riciclo, l'imballaggio diventa capolavoro.